Daybreak. It's 6:10. Now, while the UN waits to see if Syria will cooperate with weapons inspectors, the impact of more than 2 years of fighting has now created the world's gravest refugee crisis.
Today, it's estimated that the 1 millionth child will flee Syria. Nearly 2 million people are thought to have fled since the uprising began in March 2011, and over 100,000 people have been killed during the conflict.
Well, thousands of those leaving Syria are heading across the borders into refugee camps in neighbouring countries, Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey and Iraq, which is where Jaya Murthy from the children's charity UNICEF joins us now. Good morning. The refugee camp you're at didn't even exist 5 days ago, did it? So how many people are there now?
Right now, actually, I'm currently in the Karagorska refugee camp. There's around 15,000 refugees. And yes, you're right, this camp 1 week ago did not exist. So 15,000 refugees that are here at the moment have all just arrived in Iraq within the last week.
And Jaya, what kind of stories are you hearing from these people about what they've seen in their homeland?
Really horrific stories. I mean, I was here yesterday talking with many families and many children. One story is in an area called Kamishli. The family reported of bombings, children reported crying, and then basically one person in the family member was shot, which forced the family to flee. The family walked for 4 to 5 hours across the border into Iraq. They crossed a river. 2 of the children actually fell into the river. The family lost all of their clothes as they were making their journey. Then they caught some buses to come to this camp. And now they're struggling to try and set up a camp and set up a new life here.
And I'm sure that's just one story among many horrific stories, but 15,000 people in 5 days. How is the camp coping with that huge influx of people? What are the conditions like?
Well, I mean, it's the conditions are, it's a very frantic and chaotic environment. The entire international humanitarian community is here. In fact, we had a coordination meeting yesterday to see how we can respond immediately to all of the needs. We're working very closely with the Kurdistan Regional Government, who actually has been a very active and engaged partner. They provided an aid distribution yesterday of mattresses and blankets and shelters. UNICEF, we're currently looking at how we can provide the water and sanitation infrastructure to the camp, which is absolutely urgent. Most of the families don't even have access to safe water at the moment in terms of having water tanks outside of their tents. So this is an urgent need. The school year is starting in 3 weeks' time, so we need to immediately build new schools. So we're looking for space in the camp to erect a school so that we can provide some of the around 7,000 children that are in this camp access to education so that they don't fall behind. What we've seen in other areas of Iraq, many children have lost out on some of their schooling, and they've even forgotten how to read and write. So we want to make sure that this doesn't happen with this newest wave of refugees. Also, of course, it's critical that we provide a safe area in the camp where children can basically play and heal from the violence that they've witnessed, the most recent violence they've witnessed in Syria, as well as cope with the displacement and the stress that comes along with that displacement. So
Jaya, Jaya, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and we apologise for the sound quality there. Not easy to get a line up, as I'm sure you can imagine, to the Iraqi-Syria border. Joining us now in the studio, though, is journalist and Arab expert Nabila Ramdani. Nabila, thanks very much for coming in again. A few moves since we last spoke to you yesterday about this, not least the millionth child apparently fleeing the country, but the UN also reacting in a strong way to what's happening in Syria.
Well, absolutely, and I think we're sensing a bit of despair actually coming from the United Nations, with the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon sending its top disarmament official to try to seek access to the site of the alleged chemical attack. But that, of course, is going to be extremely difficult, and time is, of course, of the essence. The sooner experts and inspectors can get onto the crime scene, the better to collect evidence.
And isn't Russia the key to that? Can't Russia put pressure on Syria to let the inspectors in?
I think there's more than the Russian and indeed Chinese vetoes. The United Nations are also concerned about the security of the inspectors. Getting into an area which is effectively a war zone is also putting the very security of those inspectors at risk, something that they are unlikely to risk.
You know, as if 2 million people fleeing Syria isn't enough to destabilise the region, you know, in the likes of Jordan, Iraq and Lebanon. Overnight, we've seen Israel attack Lebanon as well. How much of a difference is that going to make? That's going to cause problems as well, isn't it?
Well, indeed, and it just shows the hugely complicated situation in that part of the world, and the reason why we're seeing, you know, the international community is not keen to intervene for all these reasons. There's of course the legacy of the Iraq War, but if you add the divisions within the United Nations and indeed the fear to create a greater conflict in the Middle East, all of these reasons constitute a deterrent.
Nabila Ramdani, good to see you again. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.